here we are. We're going to go over the ASP CAR, the Adrenocortex Stress Profile by Genova. There are two versions of this test. One is with the CAR add-on and one is without. If you do just the ASP, the Adrenocortex Stress Profile, it's 4 saliva samples, and you can see here the white tops are part of the ASP. The CAR, the cortisol awakening response, adds 2 more samples, making it 6 saliva collections that you'll be doing. And the difference is the cortisol awakening response is a normal response in the body where the levels of cortisol should, at the waking value, should shoot up in the first half hour after waking, and then it should level back down the following half hour. And so if you're doing the cortisol awakening response add-on, you're going to do your first sample in the first blue top at waking, right when you wake up. The next one is going to be 30 minutes later. And then your white top, your first white top, ideally, now we're moving into the ASP part. The first white top ideally would be a half an hour after that. So an hour after you woke up. So again, if you have the CAR add-on, you're going to do 3 samples, waking, a half an hour after waking, and an hour after waking. That's going to make up that cortisol awakening response. So we can see if your adrenals are doing what they normally should do, which means you put out at least 50% more in the first half hour, and then it levels off again. And the first white top is supposed to be between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. So if you wake up at 7, that works out great. You do samples, the first blue top at 7, the second blue top at 7:30, and the first white top at 8. Ideally, your first white top is done by 9 a.m. so that we can see your pattern with respect to the 24-hour cycle. And then the second white top is going to be around noon plus or minus an hour, so between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. The third white top is going to be in the afternoon between 3 and 5. And the last vial, the last white top is going to be between 10 p.m. and midnight. Okay, so let's talk about what you need to leave out when you do this collection. First off, well, you need to leave out anything that's going to affect cortisol. So you're going to want to leave out, stop all steroid inhalers. Now, if you need them, then we either don't do the test or we read the test with the altered cortisol values. But if indicated, you would not do any steroid inhalers, topical steroids. Basically, if you do any steroids, you have to wait 2 weeks before you do this collection because it will throw off the markers. And then the other thing you got to leave out is any herbal adrenal adaptogens. So like ginseng, ashwagandha, rhodiola, licorice, anything that's going to affect cortisol levels, you have to also leave those out for 2 weeks. Do you have any questions about that?
Does that include like more calming herbs also? So like if I have chamomile or anything?
Not really, no. The other thing you want to do is you want to take this test on a normal, typical day. So if you do chamomile tea every night, then you can go ahead and leave that in. I don't think chamomile tea is necessarily going to change the markers, but you brought up a really good topic, which is you want to do this test on like your typical average day so we can see what, because cortisol it's pretty malleable. Like it's affected by if you drink coffee, which we'll talk about in a sec. If you get really bad news or really exciting news, like if you win the Nobel Prize, maybe don't do this test the next day because your cortisol is going to be spiking because you're super excited, right? If you have a death in the family the next day or like right after that isn't maybe the best time to do this because it's going to change your markers. If you party all night and you're hungover, not the right day to do this. If you have an unusually poor night of sleep, you really want like your typical day, both with like the amount of sleep, the amount of stress, the amount of work, etc. Some people, their cortisol levels will be higher if they're having like a really intense work day, and it'll be lower on the weekend when they're chilling out, right? So you just want to do your best to pick a day that's going to be like your typical day. And then let's talk about caffeine. So different people have different advice around caffeine. Genova, this lab, says to go ahead and do what you normally do, Whereas the precision analytical people who have the Dutch test, they say take out coffee, it's going to influence the levels. I think there's a little bit of gray area. If you're someone who, can't live without your coffee, if you go off of it, you're going to have withdrawal symptoms like a headache, then maybe we should leave it in and read what it's doing to you and, have the test results be like you plus coffee and see how that's affecting you. I'm a big fan of, if you have an adrenal problem, the coffee is not helping. So I'm a big fan of, even if there's like a coffee addiction or a regular thing and maybe you get headaches going off the coffee, I'm a big fan of like tapering that down anyway and getting off the caffeine. And coffee and caffeine function a little bit similarly, but essentially getting off the caffeine gradually, slowly, so that if we do find an HP axis problem, which I'm finding right now in like 90% of my patients, then when we go to make that correction, the coffee isn't slowing that correction down, because when we are doing an adrenal correction, the coffee will usually kind of drag that process out longer. It doesn't necessarily give you more energy, kind of pulls from your reserves. And so, do you have any questions about coffee and whether to take it out or not?
No, so it sounds like if I can live without it, I should probably take it out for the test to kind of see like my body's baseline.
Exactly. I think it's better to leave it out for this test. But I also think that if you're doing it if you're doing it every day and you have to stay on it, then maybe we'll make that decision. But if you can, taper it down, back it out, and let's see what your body is doing without that push of cortisol from the caffeine. Okay, so then let's talk about how to do the collections. We already talked a little bit about that, but essentially the blue tops, you need to collect 1 milliliter of saliva, and the white tops, you need to collect 3 milliliters of saliva. And you're going to be, they say no bubbles, you want, straight saliva without a lot of bubbles. If you have a hard time salivating, if you have like a drier mouth, there's some instructions here. Think of sour foods such as lemons. I think it works well to visualize biting into a lemon, or you can smell a lemon, yawning, pressing the tip of your tongue to the roof of your mouth. They say you can rinse your mouth with water and spit it out completely. Essentially, you want to generate enough saliva so that you can get the 1 mils or the 3 mils, depending on the vial, collected within 5 minutes. If it takes too long to collect, it can throw off the data. And then you also want to have a neutral mouth, so you don't want to drink anything except water 1 hour prior to each collection. So you can see those instructions here. That means if you added on the extra cortisol awakening response, you want to do your first 3 samples before you eat breakfast or brush your teeth or anything like that. Like, you want to have a completely neutral mouth. Wake up, do those, the waking, the 30 minutes later, and then the 30 minutes after that, which falls between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. Get those done, and then you can eat breakfast, brush your teeth. And then you want to plan out your day so that the 11 a.m. to 1 a.m. collection is also in neutral mouth. You want to like finish eating and maybe not eat lunch until after you've done this collection here, the second white top, etc. Any questions about that?
No, that makes sense. So make sure I haven't eaten or drank anything besides water an hour prior to my collection.
Yeah, and then this is all in the instructions, but just as a reminder, after you collect, you put the cap on, you put the label on, you follow the instructions, make sure everything is labeled, and put it in the freezer. And they sit in the freezer until you do your last collection. And at that point, you're going to package them back up and drop them off at FedEx. And also, as a reminder, make sure you fill out the requisition form so that everything's clear, the patient information is clear. You can ignore all the billing information because you've already paid for the test. So don't worry about the billing section. That doesn't apply because it's marked as patient pay. That's about it. Do you have any other questions?
I do. So if I am doing the car, let's say like on average, I wake up at 5 a.m. to use the restroom, but then I go back to sleep. Should I collect those car samples then? Or when I like officially decide to wake up at say like 7 or 8?
That's a great question. Generally, you want to wait and collect the sample. Wait until you like wake up for the day. If you wake up in the middle of the night, go ahead and go back to sleep and don't collect until it's like your morning time to wake up. Okay. Any other questions?
No, I don't think so. It seems pretty straightforward.
Great. Well, thanks so much.
Awesome. Thank you.